the hows and whys of choosing the right name for your business. We all know how critical having that brand name is in order to achieve better success, I would say. So, you think about certain names, and certain names lend themselves to certain visuals, and certain names maybe are a little bit more sticky in people's heads than other names. And we're going to talk about some of the different naming techniques and what makes one naming technique perhaps a little bit better than another, and things to think about as you consider choosing a name for your business, or even advocating for your clients what type of name you think that they should go to. And over the last 20 years, we've probably branded a little over 1,000 small businesses, I think. And certain names just really are so much easier to brand than other names. But what is it that makes some of those names easier? And we're going to talk about some of the different things that makes one name work better than another name, and things to consider when you're choosing a name, and the hurdles that you may have to overcome in choosing a name that maybe doesn't work as well, and things you just need to be aware of. So we all think about brands and how those brands can generate the best ROI. And we see a lot of businesses that have poor brands, and we know that their ROI is being affected by having that poor design. So some of that stems from sometimes just having not even a good name to begin with. So those are some of the things that, when you see how much money these businesses are spending on advertising, and you think about all the money that they're doing to try to drive traffic to their website, or maybe have their trucks stand out on the road, if they don't have a great name or a great brand image, those are things that they're going to have to work even harder at. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the things that go into making some names work better than others, and give you a little bit of insight in terms of my experience working with so many different types of names. We're also going to talk a little bit about us rebranding and us renaming our agency, which we did. It's actually a little over a year ago. We did it last July is when we launched KickCharge. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with that, and tell you a little bit about what we went through and what that experience was like. A lot of people certainly have a lot of trepidation when you think about the idea of renaming a company. And I certainly shared that same trepidation. I was pretty worried. I was scared. I had built a business and a name that I thought people really had known for a long time. So I was scared too. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So I'm fond of saying it all begins with the brand. And it really does. But before you can get to the brand, you've got to have a name. So certain names are certainly much better suited to building a brand than others. So, starting with the basic, what makes a good name? What are some of the things that we, as designers and as marketers, try to look for with either thinking about naming a company or someone coming to us with a pre-existing name? So names that conjure up an image in the viewer's mind, even just by hearing the name without seeing a visual. So different names, you just say the name and you already have an image in your head of what that brand might look like. So that actually does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, because you don't have to necessarily now connect the dots between maybe a meaningless name and a meaningless symbol and try to connect those two. Now you've already got a name that when you state the name or you verbally express the name, it sounds like something in your head, or you can visualize something in your head as to what that name might be. So names that also give a clue about the nature of the business obviously do a lot of the heavy lifting. A meaningless name, sure, if you have the budget to throw tons of money at it, you can get anyone to know what a meaningless name means. Think about Uber. I mean, who knew what Uber means? But when you spend all this money on marketing and advertising, then you can get any name to really mean something. The problem is that most small businesses just don't have that luxury. So we're all about trying to think about it from a more obvious standpoint. If we could think about a name, and just by saying the name, I already conjure up an image and I already think about something that maybe that name represents or what that company does, then I'm already doing so much of the heavy lifting that a lot of advertising might have to do. And again, with small business, they just don't have that same luxury. So a few examples like Zoom Drain, very memorable, easy to say, and it already speaks to what it is that they do. They fix drains fast. I mean, Zoom Drain, they're really fast. And then you've got a visual that goes along with it. You've got this, we actually kind of worked a Z into this logo as well, but you've got this kind of funnel shape that really talks about what happens after they fix a a drain. The water goes down fast. So Zoom Drain, it's like a really perfect name because it sounds and it expresses exactly what they do. It's memorable. There's no confusion about it, and it's easy to remember. You know, this is a franchise, actually. They're based out of Long Island. And they previously had a brand that we redesigned. And, you know, I think this really works well for them because it speaks to, again, what that brand promises. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Blue Ox is a name that doesn't necessarily speak specifically to heating and air conditioning, but at least if I say Blue Ox, I'm already imagining a blue ox. So it sounds very obvious, but now you connect the visual with the name with it, with this type of name. Frog heating and air, another thing. Well, frog, well, obviously we're probably going to have a frog. Of course, you want to think about doing it in a way that you haven't seen done before, but the uniqueness of this particular name is something that you probably haven't heard before. It probably isn't a frog heating and air in your neighborhood, but maybe there's an Air Comfort or Air Experts or something like that. So thinking a little bit outside the box here, they came up with a name, and you know, things like that certainly make it more memorable. So continuing on this, names that conjured up an implied deliverable or expectation of service one might get when doing business with that company. So it's a very long sentence, but basically what that means is if I say the name and there's a promise already inherent in that name, that also speaks to a better brand proposition. Meaning, you know, a name like Air Experts at least sounds like this company knows what they're doing, right? They're experts. Well, the name is Air Experts. It's much better than a name that doesn't already speak to a specific promise that they might experience if they chose to hire them. Oh, the slides aren't changing? Okay, hold on a second. How about now, guys? Is that changing for you? Okay, hold on a second, guys. So nothing's changing. Give me a second, guys. All right, changing the slide now. It's bizarre. Okay, sorry, not sure what happened there. So just going back, you know, this is the first slide that we had before. First, we need a name to brand. We talked about this here. Zoom Drain was the example here that I had on the screen that I was talking about earlier. You can see the elements here that work to comprise this. Blue Ox is the other example that we had, and Frog, and then I think we were over here. So names that conjure up an implied deliverable, again, talking about what you might expect to get if you chose to do business with that company. So we call those brand promise names because they already sound like that there's a specific deliverable that you can expect to get if you chose to do business with them. So I like those names because they already sound like I should be getting something good from that particular company. And those types of names, I think, are easy to brand. They're easy to get sticky, and they're also easier for people to believe that the service that they're about to get from that other company is better than someone else's. You know, Air Experts sounds a lot better than KJ Heating and Air. It just does. So if you can lead in with that brand promise, those names tend to work a lot better, and they tend to be a lot more easy for people to believe that there's a reason why they should choose to do business with that company over someone else. So the Sunny Plumber already talks about something that is now, they're a happy company, right? They're going to come to my house and they're going to take care of my problem, and they're going to have a great disposition, and they're going to be, nice people. It already sounds like something that's positive. So inherently, most people have a view of contractors as people that maybe might take advantage of them, and maybe it's not a positive view. So thinking about that, we tried to approach it with the name. Okay, well, here's something that's going to be a pleasant experience for you to deal with. Having someone come to your house and deal with an issue is never a fun thing, but we're going to do it right, and we're going to make it an experience that is positive for you. On-time experts, another name that basically addresses part of what the concern is that a consumer might have about fixing a problem. First of all, they're inherently, worried that the people won't show up or won't show up on time, and they're worried that they won't show up in a timely manner. So here's an example of leading in with a brand promise of time. So time is what they're basically leading in as their unique selling proposition. We're going to be there on time, and we're going to do the job right. We're going to show up. Those are all positive brand promises. So another good name, Air Professionals. This is actually a local client for us, and the name says Air Professionals, so it sounds like a company that really knows what they're doing and is going to treat my home right. They're going to come in and they're going to do the job, and that's what they do. They're the professionals. This is probably one of my favorite brands that we've created recently, and I just love the look and feel of this. And you could see how this in itself is very disruptive, and how, a van like this driving down the road really garners a lot of attention, but it's also very professional. And, the way in which the name works with the image is something that we worked really hard to really match up. Cool Experts, heating and cooling. It's kind of a fun name and a fun brand. And we kind of went with the idea of cool being, cool with the sunglasses when we made the bear have the sunglasses, but Cool Experts also sounds like, well, these are the guys. These are the guys that know how to fix my house. They're the experts. So, leading in with something like that sounds like already that they're ahead of their competitors. JK Heating and Air really probably isn't as good as Cool Experts. At least they don't sound as good as Cool Experts. So why not lead in with something that already specifies that we're the best at what we do? So we prefer names like this because they really do a lot of the heavy lifting that you don't have to rely on other advertising to communicate with. I mean, you still need to do all the other things, but now I'm already setting the expectation of what that deliverable is. Yeah, thanks, Scott. That bear is a fun one that we did. And this is a cool brand. We actually just launched their website as well. And it's a really cool website. Excellent Air is another fun brand that we created, and it's a great name. Excellent Air. What else do you want to say about it? And we came up with a tagline for them. X marks the spot for comfort. We thought the visual to go along with the name was very unique. And the X-Man, I guess you could say he's an X-Man. But it's a great name. It really says what they're going to do. Do your clients give you, his question from Scott, do your clients give you crap when you make their competition look so good? We're fortunate that we don't seem to have a lot of people within the same communities that we work with. So we do try to be very careful about that. And any brand strategy we do for one client in the same community, we want to make sure we have a different one for a different community. But Excellent Air, we did their website as well. Really good people. And again, sounds much better than some of the other names that you might hear within their competitive space. There were people that had initial-based brands or names based on people's last names. Those are names which are inherently a little bit more challenging to have people believe that there is a value to that. So we also want to think about names in terms of what kind of story can be told with that particular name. Is there a message that goes along with the name and the visual that is more campaign centric? So how can we tell a story about that company with that name, that image? Is there a larger message that can go with it? So thinking about names that can really speak to the idea of having a more campaign centric approach also really works. So they lay the foundation for the rest of the advertising, which will utilize that brand story. They immediately evoke an image or an idea of what that brand might signify and potentially lay the foundation for a specific genre perhaps, or a brand story. So genre based meaning like if the name sounds like it's potentially nostalgic, well then you already have an idea of what that creative might look like and what that brand story might accompany that creative. So, this is a company out in California that we did their branding for, but it's a good name, Do It Right Plumbers, already establishing what the value proposition is and what the brand promise is. They're going to come to my house, they're going to do it right. So that's a good name. It works very well. And it already sets the expectation of the deliverable. And then, we decided to come up with a nostalgic approach to this brand. And you could see how the truck wrap worked, and how the imagery really kind of goes along with that. So the worker here, the mascot that we have, he's tipping his hat, because he just did the job right. He just did it right. So, a name like this already conjured up an image that would marry up very well. So again, a very good name. It helps tell the full brand story to go along with this campaign. Oasis Tree and Turf is another really kind of cool name to go along with the company that does chemical applications and pest control, like mosquito control. And the tagline works really well, wild about your lawn, but Oasis Turf and Tree. Well, I want my backyard to be an oasis. So there's the already inherent brand promise and expectation that I might get if I hired Oasis. I want to have a backyard that's like an oasis, and then the visual to go along with it. The idea of having this, really unique symbol to go along with the name was something that we thought would work very well, and is more of a story to tell with this concept of, wild about your lawns and how this whole brand kind of came together. Right Now Plumbing, another good name that really talks about what most people have an issue with, and how they want it fixed. Well, I don't want my drain that's not going down to be fixed tomorrow. I want it to be fixed right now. Like, I want you to come right now. So they base the brand promise on the idea of that deliverable, coming fast. So it's a good name in that sense, because a lot of the people that call for them and call for plumbers in general, it's more immediate. They're not calling because they're looking to put a sink in next week. They're calling because they have a problem right now, and they want somebody to come and fix it right now. So this already speaks to that, how this name helps solve their problem. Like, it speaks to that issue and how they can solve it very quickly. Airwiz Duct Cleaning is another one. They're the wizards. They're the best at what they do. They clean ducts, and it already lends itself also to a specific visual. So Airwiz, we thought of this cool duct, or duck, I should say, to kind of go along with the idea of a duck. And he's the wizard, and we kind of have him in the tool that they use to clean the ducts. But again, speaks to the fact that they're wizards at what they do. And this would be this would pale in comparison to a name that maybe was based on his last name, or if it was, ABC Duct Cleaning. What's to connect the ABC with the mascot and the words duct cleaning? There's like nothing to connect them all together. So those types of challenges for names are really what we deal with frequently sometimes with a company that has a name that doesn't already lend itself to a specific visual. And we'll have some examples of that too. So more things that really work to make up a good name. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Brian just said, I love how clear the messaging is from your agency. You let the company name stand out and make an impression. It's unobstructed. Yeah, and that's kind of how we believe most of the design work should be, especially as it relates to vehicles. We're trying to distill the vehicles primarily down to just a brand. Anything else that goes along with those visuals tend to distract and take away from the brand. So we really want to distill that messaging and make it very brand centric. So on to the next slide. What makes a good name? Again, more things, names that are unique and easy to remember or pronounce. Alliteration is also a technique that you can use to make it so that it's easier for people to remember. Certainly you can use a made-up name as long as there's a tie into the nature of the business. You want to try to connect the dots and maybe put words that haven't been put together before, but still give an indication of what that company does. And certainly fun names can also be easy to remember yet still be professional. That's kind of the thing you need to be careful about is, you could come up with a fun, playful name perhaps, but you've got to kind of make sure that the rest of the marketing that goes along with a name like that is still very professional, because you don't want anyone to think that the whole image is something that's cute or childish or too cutesy for them to be really professional. So you have to be careful with that. And certainly names, like we said earlier, that say a specific visual to go along with the service. We had mentioned frog before as one example, and there's a couple more here. Here's a great example, mosquito hunters. Well, there's no ambiguity about what they do. They hunt mosquitoes, okay? And they basically deal with taking back your yard. So again, a very clear and concise name that already speaks to what it is that the company does. You don't actually need much else to go along with it because it's very clear. Well, they kill mosquitoes, and that's 100% of really what they do. This is a name that we actually named here at the agency, which was a fun project for us. And this is a brand new startup that's based out in Canada. The owner started up the business and wanted to have a unique name to go along with it. And I think this is a great example of something that's still kind of fun, but obviously still very professional. And the Plums Up really gives an indication, again, of that brand promise. We're talking about, when they're done, we're going to get a thumbs up, or, obviously the play on words with Plums Up. But Plums Up speaking to plumbing, and what the expectation is of what they might get when they choose to hire them. So I really like the way this particular brand came out for us, because not only is, I think the name a really great name, but I think the way the vehicle was done and the imagery is just very unique. And, he's received like amazing feedback since this van's been on the road, and a lot of business just from people seeing the van. And for a brand new startup, he literally started from scratch with nothing. And he's already hired his first person, and that's only like a month and a half into the venture. So it's going very well. And, you can see how the investment he made in the brand and in the naming as well has really, got him the right footing to start his business. This is more of an example of a brand where the name evokes that image. And so we wanted to kind of tie those two pieces together. So colonial, already in your head, you're kind of picturing, maybe a character, or you're probably picturing something about the Revolutionary War, things like that. And we say, well, how can we kind of tie those two together? How can we, use this image here of this, colonial patriot person and match it up with the name? And then obviously too, they have a really cool tagline, which is service that's revolutionary. And I think that really speaks to what they believe in as far as their deliverable. Like, we're going to provide an amazing service. And, this vehicle, they launched with, it's an established company. They have about, I think, 15 trucks or so. And they just got wrapped a few months ago, and the response has been amazing. Like, the before and after of this particular rebrand is pretty striking. This one actually won an award for us too, which was nice. This is another company that we named as well. And it goes along with the idea of, being fun, being memorable, and trying to tie the name also to a specific visual. So what was neat about this company is they basically use only citrus-based chemicals, or I guess they're not really chemicals because they're actually from nature, but they use citrus-based cleaning products to clean carpet. So for them, the idea of Aren't You Glad, obviously the play on words is kind of fun. And then you've got this really cute mascot to go along with the name, and obviously a very orange truck. There's a lot of things really kind of connecting the dots here together to really get this brand to work, and to have people, remember this. I mean, if you saw this driving down your road, you'd probably remember it. And I think that's what, we're really trying to take advantage of that canvas. So Brian asks, are these names taking into consideration regional personality, or is this from the New England with this play in New Mexico? So that particular client is actually just based out of Washington, D.C. So obviously there's a tie into the region specifically for that name, Colonial. So yeah. So for other ones too that we've worked with, we also sometimes think about what is relevant for their geographic region. For example, we did a brand for a company that was in Louisiana, where they have a fair amount of pelicans, and we used a pelican in their particular brand because that's more related to their specific area. So this is a company that we named recently, Fixmatic, and this is, I think, a fun brand, but still looks professional and still looks like something that, you'd probably remember seeing driving down the road. So Fixmatic is a made-up word. the .com was available. And when you think about the name Fixmatic, it already conjures up maybe some type of visual to go along with it. So we thought that this one would be kind of a cool one to be a little bit nostalgic and to think about kind of those cool, retro robot images that, were prevalent in the late 50s and early 60s, and try to, think about what somebody like that would have today. So he's had this truck on the road only a couple of weeks and has done really well with it so far. And it's been, this is a fun one for us to work with. Again, two things about this that make it work really well too is even just thinking about the color scheme. A lot of this is very unique in terms of colors. You don't typically see these types of colors deployed. So those are all things that also play along with having the brand be a little bit more sticky. So now we're going to talk about some of the challenges you have with some names. And as designers, these may be companies that come to us that already have a name, and maybe they've been using it forever, and maybe they don't want to change it, which is understandable as well. So what are the hardest types of brands that we come across to name are names that are use initials. For us are really the absolute hardest types of brand images to gain traction with. There isn't generally something that makes it that a specific set of initials like ADK that I can associate an image with, like what goes with ADK naturally. So they're a lot harder to get people to remember. I always tell the story of a company that cuts my grass has been cutting my grass for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. They park a 25-foot trailer in front of my house every time they cut the grass, and their logo is huge on the side of the trailer. And I can't tell you the name of the company. I really can't, honestly. I think it's ADK Landscaping or something like that. But, for a guy whose whole life revolves around brands, I should be able to remember the name of the company that cuts my grass. But I can't, because there's nothing about it that is memorable to me. And the logo is not, it's not like it's a terrible logo. And it's okay, but it's got a leaf, and okay, so it's got a leaf, but there isn't anything else about it that really should strike me as something that I should remember. And so, we get a lot of companies that have initial-based brands, and they really are a challenge for us to really get something that associates that initial with a specific visual. It's really impossible to do. So, we'll have that conversation and talk to the clients and let them know what the challenges are with that type of naming architecture, and just say, listen, there isn't anything where immediately when I think of these 3 initials or these 2 initials that make me think of a specific visual. So we can design a logo, we can design a brand, but it's going to need to require a bit more work and advertising and dollars to get people to hopefully remember it. And we've had success with people that we've done it for. It just takes a little bit longer. Sometimes the initials used to mean something that was important part of their previous business, and then maybe they decided to just shorten it. And in certain verticals, maybe that works. Maybe people already knew them as such, or maybe people had already started to abbreviate their name as such. But as a brand new startup, if you're going to start up with an initial-based brand, I would say that that's a huge mistake. Just only because no one's going to remember it. It's going to be very difficult for people to, connect the dots, so to speak, of that particular brand. So, Gary, yeah, that's, I should send the video to my landscape. He's a good guy. Like he does really good work. It's just one of those things where it's unfortunate, and it's not unique to him, but I think it's similar for a lot of companies. So this is a client that we branded that uses initials. He's out in California. Super good company, great people to work with. But I had a lot of challenges trying to figure out how to develop a brand story to go along with this name. So he wanted to go nostalgic from the beginning. So we developed this look and feel. And yes, his trucks are very unique and they do stand out. And, people now know, I think, what his company is. But it's hard to say that JW automatically in your mind should be something that's nostalgic, or that it's related to something retro, or that this mascot is somehow related to this JW. It just has to do a lot. It has to work a lot harder to get people to make those connections. One J.R. Watkins. I don't know who J.R. Watkins, Scott. What kind of business is that? I've never heard of them. So I'll wait for Scott to answer on that. But RDS is a company here in New York City that we branded. And this is an example of a company that started out where it used to be spelled out something, and it stood for Radiology Delivery Service. And what this company used to do is they would provide medical records and films between doctors. So they would deliver medical records and more specifically radiology records. So it had its roots in something else, and then it got shortened because that whole business really changed, obviously, when digital radiology came about, and there was no longer a need for a delivery service. And then they kind of morphed into more of a traditional messenger service. So RDS, you know, I think if he were to name the company today, he would probably take a different route. And Larry, who's the owner of RDS, was going to be on this webinar, but he couldn't make it today. And I told him we were going to be talking about his brand. But, you know, I think if anyone was coming to us today and say, hey, we want to start a messenger service business, there's no way we would be saying, well, let's name it something with initials like RDS, because there isn't anything about RDS that speaks in my mind as something that should be related to, first of all, a delivery service. Second of all, something that implies speed, something that implies, you know, getting there on time. You know, those are types of visuals that you would want or hope that that name would be associated with. Even when you think about Federal Express initially started out as Federal Express, not FedEx. They shortened it, but the express part of it was the idea of getting something there fast. So, you know, again, initial-based brands generally very difficult to have people remember and to get in their heads. I mean, IBM, you could say, well, everyone knows IBM. Well, but yeah, everyone knows IBM because they've been around forever and they've thrown millions of dollars at people getting to know what IBM means. So, you know, just something that, you know, is a couple examples. D&T cooling, heating and air, you know, trying to get something to associate it with it. We came up with the idea of a penguin. But again, it's not something where I could cover up, like if I covered up the penguin and just said, well, what do you imagine in your head when you think of D&T? There's nothing that's going to show up, or that there's no image that's going to be conjured when you think about that. J&A, you know, another initial-based brands, you know, and these are all ones that I think we did a great job of trying to develop something that would be at least memorable and associated with that. But again, a little bit more difficult to deliver a brand promise. You know, J&A Electric doesn't necessarily speak to some of my concerns as a consumer when I'm looking to hire someone. It doesn't speak to, do they show up on time? Are they professional? You know, is the work going to be done to a certain standard? You know, there's nothing inherently being said specifically with that particular name. So a common name for small businesses based on their last names. We see that, you know, I would say probably more of our brands are based on clients' last names than the other way around, if I think about it. So, you know, what can you do with last name brands? Is that a smart idea if you're starting up? If it's a company that's been around for a long time, does it make sense to keep that last name if it's got some recognition within a specific community? You know, yeah, I mean, certainly we know that last name brands can work, and they can work very well. We know that they can gain traction in communities, especially if they've been there for a long time. But those are all things that generally take a while to get to. You know, when I think about the earlier example for Plums Up, I don't know that if he started that company with his last name, that he'd be doing as well as he's doing right now, because there isn't anything about his last name that people would know what that last name might signify or what that might mean for them, or even if they would even remember what his last name was. So it's certainly a common approach. You see it done frequently. But again, like I said, it offers less of a brand promise because there isn't anything inherent about that last name that might mean something to me unless they've been in the community for a long time. Again, smaller community, but more difficult to gain traction outside. One thing that I love and we try to think about is if the last name speaks to or might give a clue to a specific visual. And we got a couple of examples here, but that's something that really can work well then, because you're owning that last name and now you're associating a visual to go with that last name. And it's unlikely that your competitors are living or doing something similar in that space. So, you know, a few examples, but here's one where it's just based on the last name. And all the things that we did in their communications really help establish what that Timo's brand should signify. But we had to really work at that. We really had to make people understand what that last name means to them, what they can expect to get from them. So, all the components that we've put together for them really speak to what that brand looks like, or signifies, I should say. But it's something that has taken time to get to that point. They're now probably one of the most well-known brands in Palm Springs. They're out in California. But when they first started, it was something that we really had to work to overcome. We really had to get people to know what that Timo's brand meant. And so, you could see some of the other pieces we put together, their vehicle, their website. You could see how it's a little bit more, there's a campaign based around the idea of delivering that premium service that is sometimes associated with a nostalgic brand. But it took some time to get there. Gettle is another example. They're based out in Phoenix. Gettle was someone's last name, not something you would say, hey, let's name a heating and air company Gettle. But Gettle was actually a type of air conditioning equipment that was very popular in that part of the world, in Phoenix. And those air conditioning systems some of them are still in use today, even though they were manufactured like 50 years ago. They're like these bulletproof heating and air conditioning systems. So people knew what that name signified. And then the brand that we developed for them was, somewhat inspired by what the actual badging on the equipment used to look like. And it was kind of shaped like this diamond shape here. And then the campaign revolved around the idea of the owner working with his dad, who he would hold the flashlight while his dad worked on the equipment. So that's the significance of the boy holding the flashlight, and all their radio spots and their billboards and their commercials that they've done on TV all speak to that. But we had to tell that story. We had to let people know what Gettle signified for the people who maybe hadn't heard of the equipment and just, well, what does this company Gettle mean? So again, hugely successful brand, has done phenomenal in his market. And but the brand story that went along with it, we had to use other mediums to tell that brand story. So here's an example of a last name brand that we decided to tie into the idea of a dog running with a wrench in his mouth, Barker. So now you can kind of connect the idea of why there's a dog running, obviously, and then the last name Barker to go along with it. And now you've made a connection that at least makes some sense, better than other names. So I like this brand because Barker's unique. He's unique in his space. We've got a visual to go along with his last name. And now we connected all the dots together and it makes sense. The tagline we wrote for him, your companion for a healthy home, also really helps tell the story of what that deliverable might be. This is a client out here in New Jersey that we do some work for, and last name Swanton. And we were thinking when we were working on the creative for this, I was like, well, is there something about that we can try to own? Can we make something about Swanton related to a specific image? And obviously we connected the swan with the Swanton, but at least there was an attempt made there because the Swanton, it sounded like something. So again, an example of how you can kind of get a last name brand to work specifically with the visual. So, as designers, we have people that come to us, they'll talk about branding. If it's a name that I think is, maybe it's initial-based brand, maybe it's a name that doesn't sound like it would be a great name. We would talk about what are the challenges about considering renaming the company. Okay, what are some of the challenges? Like we had a client that was, the name of the company, I can't disclose the name of the company, but it was based on a town that they worked in. Let's just say we're in Washington, New Jersey. Let's just say it was Washington Heating and Air. Okay. And the problem is that they wanted to work in other communities, and everyone thought, well, they don't work in my community because the name of the company is Washington. So, you have challenges like that. You have challenges where sometimes there's an initial base brand that again doesn't work very well. It's hard to spell. It's not easy to remember. So, we try to talk to them about the challenges here. So when is it time to actually change? Does the name reflect who you currently are, and what your brand promise is? I always ask people too, what if you were walking out of a supermarket and you handed out your business card to 100 shoppers and you're right in the heart of where you work? How many of those shoppers would say they had heard of your company? And if most would say, you know, that they hadn't heard of your name of the company, then you really don't have a ton of brand recognition within your own community. And maybe that's indicative of a problem that you might want to address in thinking about a name change, perhaps. Certainly we've dealt with company names that are so difficult to spell. And it's like, well, if it's really hard for them to spell, how are they going to try to find you or remember that name? When saying your name, would anyone know what you did without hearing the second part of your name? So even when you say Timo's, well, I don't know what Timo's does, but Timo's Heating and Air, well, yeah, okay, now I get what Timo's Heating and Air. So if it's always better if the primary name can say what you do without relying on the secondary part of your name. And then again, is there a complementary graphic or icon which naturally would go with that specific name? So I want to just talk briefly about us and our journey in renaming the company. Some of you that are here may remember us in our previous name as Graphic Designs. That was the name I came up with in 1997 when I started the company. And originally I thought it was like really clever. I'm like, well, we do graphic design work and we also do some sign work. And the sign work that we did was really related to doing truck lettering at that time. There wasn't really truck wraps. So I thought it was kind of clever and I thought, well, it's cool. And I got the .com with the hyphen because the name legally has a hyphen in it. And I thought that was kind of neat. And then after a while, I didn't think it was really so neat, but I was so vested in it. I thought, well, I don't think I should change it because everyone knows us as Graphic Designs, or that's what I've been for at that point. It was 20 years before I decided to change it. So as we were building this new office here, you know, I knew we couldn't come to this new office as Graphic Designs. I knew it was the right time to change. But certainly, yeah, it was a little scary because I thought, well, is everyone going to know about the name change? Is everyone going to realize that we changed our name? But the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, Graphic Designs it's not who we are. We're not a graphic design company and we're not a sign company. Like we don't even do signs. Like we only do design work. So it really made no sense for us to really continue as that name, but I was very worried about it. You know, yeah, it was scary, but as we started really looking into the idea of getting a different name, you know, we came up with the idea of KickCharge because we thought it was a name that really captured the energy that we feel like we bring to the table every day here. So, you know, we look at when a client comes to us, like we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to kill it for you. Like we're going to crush it. Like we're like super excited and we're energized. So thinking about a name that really captured that energy was how we kind of came up with KickCharge. And I think it really works well for us. You know, once we decided that was our name, we still had probably 6 months to go or 9 months to go to get our website launched under that name and to get ready to have it. But once we had decided that was what it was, like I couldn't wait for it to be our name. You know, I was super excited for it because I was getting so tired of telling people graphicd-signs.com, like it's spelling it out. It was like, and I was just so looking forward to being able to say, go to kickcharge.com. It's just so much easier. And it felt like there was a much better brand story that we can tell with that name KickCharge. So we've been KickCharge since last July. I would say that we didn't miss a beat as far as what happened with our previous customers and any new customers. And I think we've probably achieved more brand recognition in 1 year than we had in 19 previous years under Graphic Designs. I think it's a name that people remember. I think the way in which it's structured and the way in which we've built the brand around it really feels like us, you know, and I'm super proud to wear, you know, a hat or my t-shirt. I'm wearing a t-shirt now with the brand. But yeah, it was scary. And I understand going through it myself, why some people might be afraid to do it themselves. You know, I get it. You know, I went through it. I know what's involved. I think the next slide we talk about, well, I'm going to talk about why we changed it. I sort of went through everything already. The other thing I didn't talk about, though, is the fact that Graphic Designs as a name wasn't really ownable. It'd say, where do you work? I say Graphic Designs. No, like, where do you work? I'm like, no, it's Graphic Designs. You know, D with a hyphen. And, you know, so I couldn't even own the fact that our company name was brandable. Like I couldn't do anything to make it brandable. So I love the fact that we can say KickCharge and, we're going to KickCharge your brand or get your brand KickCharge. Like we can use it as a verb, as an adjective. There's so many different ways we can use it, and we own it. We were able to also get it trademarked, and that was something that was important for us too, is get it trademarked so that no one else can use it. So we're the only creative agency in the world that can be called KickCharge. And I think that that's also something that's pretty neat, that we have that we weren't able to have before. So we talked a lot about branding. I just want to run through this really quick. I've talked about this before on some of the other webinars, but for people who haven't seen it, people get confused with the idea of branding, and I just wanted to go through this quick. So if you just think about the logo as the center of a wheel, and all these elements going around the wheel are what comprise a brand. So the logo is the hub. It provides the driving force from which everything else is built. It's the foundation to deliver a positive brand promise. And then again, without a good brand, the ROI is compromised on everything, especially on a truck. And then they say, well, what does branding mean? Like, how do you explain what branding means? And we look at that as brand is what people feel about your company. A brand is what people say about your company behind your back, or if they were at a party talking to someone, how would they describe working with your company? That's all part of the branding. And certainly a brand is the perception of all the different touch points that a consumer interacts with in order to form that impression of your company. Certainly vehicles personify a brand experience a consumer might expect to receive. Characteristics of a good brand: disruptive. We talk about that a lot because we want our brands out there to look different than everyone else's brands. They don't fit in and they stand out. They deliver positive brand promise. They're easy to read. They help tell the right story, and they instill themes like confidence, security, longevity, and certainly good ones have a memorable name. So just wrapping up to talk about the logistics and the legalese to consider when thinking about naming a company. Certainly you want to check the federal trademarks to make sure that you can actually use your name before you invest in building a brand. So if you've been using your name already and that name has not been trademarked and then someone else comes in afterwards and trademarks it, you still can use your name within your specific community and area, but you're going to be limited now if you did want to grow into other states, because now someone has a trademark on that name, even though you've been using it ahead of time. So we always tell people, if they have something unique, if they have a name that they want to protect and make sure that no one else out there can actually use, to get that name trademarked. Certainly going to Melissa and her crew would be a great way to get that done. They can handle the trademarking of the name, the mark, all those elements that would go into it. So again, just talking about if it was already registered, you could still use it, but you might not be able to use it outside your area. Obviously file with your state. They're going to also see that anyone else in your state is using that name or not using that name. Definitely want to consider too, if someone else has that name and maybe you have the ability to use it within your state, but maybe there's a company using that name elsewhere that has very poor reviews about their company, and making sure that you don't jump on to that and get associated with another company that has really bad reviews. I just was talking to a lead the other day and he told me the name of his company, and I had Googled it while we were talking, and then I found this other company with the same exact name that had these horrible reviews, and they were only a state away. And I pointed that out. I said, listen, dude, like, you've got a name that has got mud thrown on it all over the place online. It's Yelp and Google, and the reviews were horrible. I'm like, so just, give that some thought, because now all of a sudden you're being associated with this other guy who is not doing very well online with his reputation. So, do some research about that. Certainly .coms are hard to come by, but I think they do have a better brand value if you can get it. That's why you see a lot of things being made up, like even our name being made up, putting two words together that don't normally belong together. You have a little bit better chance sometimes of finding an available name that way. So where do you go? The logistics as far as trying to figure it out. I would say, certainly, use some of these tips. There's some resources online too to try to help name. Try it yourself. You know your business probably better than anyone else. So maybe there's something that you think would work. Come up with something on your own and give it a shot. If you can't come up with anything on your own, then certainly think about working with a creative agency. You know, they have teams of writers. Like we have a team of writers that really work hard to try to think about all the different avenues that you have to consider when doing naming. And they also might have some specific visuals and creative to go along with some of those names. So, you know, if you do come up with some names on your own and you are working with an agency that's going to be handling the creative, then I would say run it by them. You know, show them a dozen of the ones that you're thinking of. And, you know, often there's going to be something within there that may spark a very specific creative that would go along with it. So, you know, we like to see sometimes if a client is coming to us and they're a brand new startup, and they're still in the naming process, well, you know, what do you have so far? And let us take a look at that, because we may look at some of those names and say, man, if we went with this name, we could do this, and really give them some ideas about creative that would go along with it that we think would work well. You know, let me just see. Yeah. So, you know, that basically is all I had to go on today, but I just want to see if anybody has any questions or anything that I didn't touch on that they have questions about. I think we've got the link that was posted earlier for Melissa for franchiselawsolutions.com. So again, that's a great company that we work with, a great law firm that can help with some of the legalese that goes along with naming and trademarking logos. But I'm not seeing any questions. Come on, you guys have to have some questions for me. All right, so Brian wrote, any particular thoughts regarding brands that are spelled phonetically as opposed to normal conventional spellings? So, yeah, Brian, that's a good question, because, you know, sometimes being cute with how a brand is spelled can make it unique, but then you run into the problem of when you verbally say that particular name that no one then knows how to actually spell it or find it. So, you know, we did a company called AirLogix, and it was Logix. We had actually named that particular company, and we did their branding. But it's always something that I know that when they verbally say AirLogix, that they have to say Logix, because everyone thinks it's spelled the other way. So, you know, I think as long as, you know, you handle educating people about that phonetic spelling, it can work. But yeah, I see the challenges with it as well too. Alex Williams wrote, what process do you take when creating a slogan? A lot of times for us, slogans are written up by our team here after the branding is done. Meaning, like, after I've already designed the logo and the look and feel of the logo, or even the truck wrap, we'll then think about a slogan that would complement that. You know, you think about, you know, for example, we did a brand called Shaw's Heating and Air, and it was based in a shore community where they have a lot of fishing and crabbing and things like that. And we did a crab to go along with that particular brand. I'll see if I could call it to the screen real quick. And that particular company, you know, until we developed the crab to go along with that particular brand, it would have been premature to write the tagline at that particular point. So we wrote the tagline, and I'm just going to, yeah, here it is. It's on our website in the portfolio, but I think I could send a link actually here. Yeah. That's the link if you guys want to see it. But the truck wrap, the tagline, service that's a keeper. So, you know, clearly we couldn't have written that tagline until the creative was done. So I think that that's something that we usually wait and see what the creative looks like before developing a tagline. Sometimes clients come to us and they already have a tagline to go with it. So hopefully that answers that question for you, Alex. Scott wrote, are there any tools or processes you use to help you brainstorm ideas? Well, we start the process with every client by doing a kickoff call with them and researching their competitors before we have that call. And so we talk to them about what direction that creative might take. So we're already during that call trying to determine some aesthetics about where we're going. So that generally helps us because we also ask them to look at brands that we've created and identify ones that they like and ones that they potentially don't like. So we have kind of an idea ahead of time of maybe what the creative direction might look like, whether it's going to be, clean and modern or nostalgic, for example. So we have some of that already thought out ahead of time. And then as far as where do we go to try to get some inspiration or get some different ideas, certainly, again, depending on the genre, if it is nostalgic, for example, then we certainly have a lot of resources with old advertising and books that we tend to go to try to see if there's elements of things that that we could draw some inspiration from. And sometimes it's hard too, because even like when we do a lot of mascot design, how many different ways can we develop a mascot that's holding a wrench in a toolbox? So we really want to try to think about, is there a way that we can really reinvent this idea? Is there a way that we can be different with the same idea of having a mascot, but done in a way that we haven't done before? There's a brand that we're about to launch for a company that is based out in Minnesota, and the style and the genre that we rendered this creative is something that we've never done before. Like we've never ever explored this particular style of rendering. And for us, that's exciting. And it's challenging also to really kind of think about, the concept of presenting an idea that is unique and different. And that's a struggle. There isn't a lot of other designers, unfortunately, that I think we draw a ton of inspiration, because I feel like it's very specialized sometimes, especially in the HVAC world, the work that we do in that particular sector, where I don't see a lot of stuff that's very specific or relatable to us. So we generally try to go through resources like books and see if there's things within there that we can just take the semblance of a little idea or a kernel of an idea and work from. Doug Downey. Hey, Doug, how you doing? Looking back, is there a logo you designed and regret doing it? I don't know that there's a logo I would say that I regret doing it. I would say if I look back on our body of work, there's definitely logos that maybe if I was designing it today, I might have designed it differently than was done in the past. So I think there's probably more of that. Not necessarily that I regret that we did anything specific, but that, oh yeah, we kind of were doing a lot maybe in that specific look and feel. And today it feels like that might not be as relevant, or it might not be how we would approach it today. So I think there's probably more of that where I would look back. And again, after 1,000 logos, there's bound to be some ones that we look at today and we're like, oh, we probably would have approached this way differently today than we did back then. But I think that's only natural. And I think, to a certain extent, every brand has a shelf life that you would expect. I mean, most even larger companies, you see them rebranding after a period of time. But I don't think there's anything that I wish we hadn't done, but more so that I think we might have just done differently today. Patrick had said, how do you handle difficult clients when it comes to agreeing on the logo, naming, slogan? What steps do you take to convince them? I would say a lot of times, we've tried to really refine how we pitch naming to clients to include a creative discussion with it. What we found is that if we pitch names to a client in the absence of any creative that goes along with it, a lot of clients just don't have an idea of how that brand might actually be fleshed out. So, I like to be on the call with the client when we show them, usually we present, let's say 4 or 5 different names and talk them through what we might present creatively with that. So we'll verbally talk about the idea. Like when we pitched Fixmatic, we said what the idea would be to go with it. We said, listen, we're going to do something, really like old school 60s robot kind of idea. I even talked to him about, I thought we were going to do something with a helmet, like a space helmet thing. And we try to get them to visualize what that name could be with the campaign. We don't ever present sketches to go along with it, but we certainly talk to them verbally about what that creative might look like in order to have them better understand the potential of a name. Because there's been some names that, guys really weren't too excited about when we first verbally told them about it. And then we talked to them about the creative to go along with it. And then they'd sort of get more excited about it. And they're like, oh yeah, that could be really cool. So, if you're just going to send a Word document to them without talking about the creative, it very rarely works because they can't visualize what's going to go along with that particular name. So, we've kind of found that process to work out. So Scott just posted something. Check out this name generator that uses artificial intelligence to suggest names. I've used it on a few clients and I find it pretty helpful, especially with tech companies. I'll have to check that out. Business name generator. Generate a short brandable business name using artificial intelligence. Oh, that's pretty cool. Doug wrote, how do you handle clients that want to design the logo for you? Use you as the guy to do all the clicks. We're fortunate that I don't feel like we deal with that a ton, but certainly you have clients that want to be very actively involved in the creative process. I think it's our job to listen to their feedback and talk to them about what their requests might be. There's been plenty of instances where clients have had a great idea that have made the logo better. I think all feedback is relevant. I think if from a design perspective, if you're being asked to do something that runs contrary to best practices or what would really work for them, you have to stop and really try to explain why that idea isn't going to work and wouldn't be in their best interest. And I think I've tried to really be more open to listening to what they might have to say. And then if it's something where I feel strongly is going to not work in their best interest, I just try to be honest with them. I say, listen, I could do that for you, but it's not really what I think would work for you. And here's why. And, at the end of the day, if they want to go ahead with it, then that's really up to them. But, it's my job as a designer to really explain to them why that particular solution may not work. Sometimes it's a compromise, and sometimes they say, you know what, you're the expert, that's fine. If you think this wouldn't work, we were just wondering. And, and sometimes it doesn't take long to really show them what they were asking. And then they can visually see why it might not work. Brian asks, when you're helping to name a business, are you entirely focused on the market research, or are you still catering a bit to what the owner likes? Exactly. So, and he said sometimes his preference runs opposite his interest, so totally. Yeah. So, we're always thinking about trying to balance what a client is asking us to do, what they personally might like versus what it is their customers like, and you have to really consider that sometimes what they like isn't who they're selling to likes. And we try to have that conversation really very early on in the kickoff call. If we're going through the brief and they've identified logos in our portfolio that I feel would be inappropriate for who they're trying to target, we'll have that discussion and we'll talk about the reasons why I think that might not work. If they're, doing a brand that, is catering to a specific segment of the population and they have that demographic really likes something, let's just say that's more feminine. Let's say they're a landscaper and they're catering mainly to women putting in backyard patios. Well, we've got to have that discussion. I don't want to make a logo that's cool for you and your buddies when the people who are buying your service aren't that audience. So we try to be open about that and talk to them and really try to make sure before we end that call on the creative kickoff that we've identified with them the direction and they understand why we're going to advocate for one specific direction versus another. So. Scott, I got to check out that name generator thing. That looks like that could be pretty cool. Yeah. All right, cool, guys. Well, I don't see any other questions. Shannon, thanks for coming. And everybody else that attended, I really appreciate you spending an hour. Sorry, it ran a little bit longer than I thought, but we're going to have another webinar probably next month. I think we have the topic, or I don't know if we actually have the topic yet. So you guys will get an email when we have it scheduled, and I hope to see you guys there. Thanks so much for everyone attending. Scott, Brian, Alex, I appreciate it. Patrick, good to see you. Oh, wait, I just got told it's the power of collateral. So yeah, our next webinar is going to be more about traditional print media, which I think is going to be cool because we're going to talk about brochures, why that's still important, why that's still relevant. And then I think most of you know about the book that I wrote, but this is my book, Building a Big Small Business Brand. You can buy that through our website or certainly on Amazon, but naming is discussed in here, as well as obviously branding and some other things like that. If you guys wanted to pick up a copy, that'd be cool. Or you can buy it from here, and I'll autograph for you, and it'll be worth tons of money after I'm dead. So, you know, you can have that too. They're gonna get a coupon mailed to you. They get a coupon emailed for the upcoming webinar. Okay, cool. All right, somebody just messaged me that you guys will get notified. Cool. All right, thanks guys. Great to have you here today.